Hey friends, welcome back. Today I'm bringing you the classic book recommendation video of if you liked this book, then you should try this book. We're starting off with a recommendation of a book that I think deserves way more hype than what I've ever seen it receive. This first pairing is If You Liked Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, then I want you to read The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea by Maggie Hall. This book has a special place in my heart because I think it was my first book club pick ever for my book club that I run in my Patreon. And I remember being so nervous hosting the first live show, and it just went so well, and I think so fondly of this book. First and foremost, I think it's a phenomenal story. I love this cover so much. There's a face in the water here. It's sapphic pirates and like an imperial daughter, I believe. There's a little catchphrase at the bottom, and it says, Maggie Hall's sweeping fantasy debut, full of stolen memories, illicit mermaid's blood, double agents, and haunting mythical creatures, conjures an extraordinary cast of characters and the unforgettable story of a couple striving to stay together in the face of myriad forces wishing to control their identities and destinies. And this is just one of those books for me that I genuinely think deserves more hype. It was beautiful, it was fast-paced, it was worthwhile, just like Tress of the Emerald Sea. Both of them are set at the sea for most of the time. I think that Tress of the Emerald Sea has much more like humor than this book. This book isn't necessarily funny, but I think this recommendation is solid enough to mention, and mostly I just don't see anyone talking about this book ever, and I just really like it. So that's my first book rec to you. The next one that I have, I think, is one of the most solid ones ever. That's such a ballsy thing to say. But if you liked The House of Hollow, is it by Crystal Sutherland? Then you need to read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. The vibes of both of these books are so similar that like I would die on this book recommendation. That's dramatic, but honestly, prove me wrong. House of Hollow I read years ago, whatever year it came out, and it's following a set of twins, I believe, that go missing when they're younger. They come back like very different. They have this like half moon scar on the base of their throat, and they're just a little bit more odd. They don't remember what happened to them during the years that they were missing. And then when they're older, one of the sisters goes missing again. And the younger sister has to like come to terms with what happened to them when they were younger and like use that as information to find her sister again. Wow, I actually do remember it. And now, Last Tale of Flower Bride involves a woman and her, like, now husband. He's named as the bridegroom, and it's a dual point of view. His point of view is so heavily relatable to the Starless Sea that is why I enjoyed this book so much. His point of view is very flowery and poetic, and then her point of view is more like backstory, where I believe they go back to her aunt's house because she's dying and they have to like do something with the estate. This estate is called the House of Dreams, and within the crumbling manor's extravagant rooms and musty halls there lurks the shadow of another girl, Azure, Indigo's dearest childhood friend who disappeared without a trace. And during Indigo's point of view, we're following them as they grow up, and they're sort of like witchy little girls, very much like living in different fantastical worlds as like you do when you're a kid, but like they're actually real in this world. And as the house slowly reveals his wife's secrets, the bridegroom will be forced to choose between reality and fantasy, even if doing so threatens to destroy their marriage or their lives. And I just remember so frequently while reading this book thinking like, wow, this is exactly how I felt while reading House of Hollow. House of Hollow I think has a little bit more like body horror in a way. This is more like I mean, they're both really atmospheric. Let me not say that. But truly, if you like one, I do think that you would like the other. This next recommendation is one that I said recently, I think, but I'm putting it in this video to have like a central location to where you know, you could find it. But if you read or are a little bit afraid to read Ripe by Sarah Rose Etter because you've looked at the trigger warnings and you don't really know if it's something that you want to experience, which is understandable, and you should look at the trigger warnings for this book, just like you should look at the trigger warnings for the next book, probably. But if you liked this book, I think that you would like Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. I think that these books have a very similar energy for the main character in a sense of how they view the world and their existence. I will say Ripe is very dark. There's no hope in this book, okay? But it is so perfectly written for what this main character is going through. And likewise, I think that Interesting Facts About Space, the main character is going through a different set of problems, but the tone overall is mostly the same, except this one has a little bit more hope and I don't know. There's a bit more humor within this story than this story. But I do think that this is such a solid book recommendation as well. So let me give you quick synopses of both of them. Ripe is about our main character, Cassie. That's right. Oh, Cassie. She's trapped herself in this corporate job that she absolutely hates. There's long hours, toxic bosses, and a lot of like unethical projects that she's forced to work on. There'll be scenes of her sitting like at this boardroom along this like absolute massive spread of food, and she'll look out the window and see unhoused people, you know, struggling to get a single meal, while all the people at this spread are complaining about like what choices were made for the catering for that lunch. She's trapped between this duality, and it starts to weigh on her even heavier and heavier with every passing page. She doesn't take care of herself. She says in the synopsis, she winds up unexpectedly pregnant and she continues to not take care of herself. And it says that she is always feeling so alone, but she never actually is, because she has a companion that is a dark black hole, which grows bigger by the day. And then Interesting Facts About Space is about our main character, Enid, who I love. She is neurodivergent and she struggles a lot with mental health and intrusive thoughts and paranoia and other things that are explored. And she went through some really traumatic things when she was growing up. We're following her as an adult, living on her own, going through dating apps, having very casual flings with other women, but she is going through her like first serious romantic entanglement. But it's all very messy because she starts sort of like spiraling in her paranoia, and one thing is she's very terrified of bald men, and one of her newest neighbors in her apartment complex is a bald man. So for example, she will crawl in through her window instead of go through her front door, and many, many other things. Both of these books touch on very serious topics. I think both of the main characters are so wildly relatable in many different ways. So again, this recommendation, I feel like I've been talking about these two books for way too long, but I feel so strongly about both. I love both of these books. So take care of yourselves while reading these, but I would recommend them. Okay, let's move on. This next one is just sort of like a little silly, goofy one, okay? So if you liked Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames, this is just like a very unserious but high stakes fantasy story where the literal quote is "the boys are back in town." It's a group of mercenaries that used to run the wild, which is, you know, the big forest where all of the danger is. They used to be unstoppable, and now they're older and their joints don't work like they used to, but one of the guys, his daughter, is in trouble. So all of the guys get back together for one last mission, and I just love them. It's such a good book. Very humorous, but very exciting. I would recommend the audiobook for this one, but if you liked this one or are interested in this one, I would for sure recommend The Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan, where this one is like more unserious and sort of funny. I wouldn't say The Age of Myth is necessarily unserious because there are like battle scenes and more serious things explored, but the writing style that Michael J. Sullivan has still has that like little humor placed so perfectly throughout the story. And when I was trying to come up with this list, I felt like this made enough sense to recommend to you because this one has the humor, but it also leans more heavily into the sort of like classic fantasy. Like it felt so cozy within the storytelling, while this one felt cozy because of like humor reasons. This one just felt like a bedtime story that I would have loved. I hope that makes sense. But The Age of Myth is a story surrounding a world where there are human and then this like immortal sort of style creature called the Frey. But one of these godlike creatures falls to a human's blade, and now the balance of power between these two races are altered because now we have a main character named Wraith, who is known as the God Killer, who's done something that no one thought was possible. And then we have our other main character, Suri, who is a seer. She brings a prophecy to another main character, Persephone, and tells her that there is going to be like mass murder, like everyone is going to die. And Persephone, obviously it's not taken well, but we're following that situation. The final sentences are, "The age of myth is over, the time of rebellion has begun," and I just love it. I just love it. So read this for the like like cozy humor adventure, and then read this for like the cozy fantasy vibes that are a little bit more serious but still has the humor. I don't know if these are directly relatable, but I see it. I could see it, which is why I'm telling you about it. Listen, this next one. If you loved The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, I want you to read The Husbands by Holly Ramazio. Both of these are romance books that have like a little bit of a fantasy element because they both involve some sort of like time travel or magic system that can't exactly be explained. So 7-Year Slip, our main character, she's living in her aunt's apartment, which basically every time she goes in, it's like 7 years in the past. And one day when she goes into the apartment, there is a man in there who is living 7 years in the past, but they are both in the same 4 walls. So they're both living in the same time. But when she leaves, she goes back to her 7 years in the future and he stays there in his time period. It's very much one of those things that you just have to accept as like, that's the thing. And it's the same thing in this book. But these two main characters that are meeting in this like weird time warp of an apartment meet in her real life. And it's a romance book around that situation where he's not yet in the 7 years in the future, but they know about each other. Hold on. I need to know what I can and cannot tell you about The 7-Year Slip. My friend is borrowing my book right now. Yeah, no, all of that is accurate. I said it very messily, but basically our main character is Clementine, and her aunt always said the apartment was like a pinch in time, a place where moments blended together like watercolors, and Clementine knows that if she lets her heart fall, she'll be doomed. After all, love is never a matter of time, but a matter of timing. So it's like a time travel sort of vibe of a romance book, and the vast majority of people really love it. And if you did love it, or you kind of liked it, I want you to pick up The Husbands, because this one, if you don't know, is about the situation where our main character comes home late at night one night to a husband, to a man that she apparently married. There's wedding photos everywhere. She doesn't remember this. She doesn't know who he is, but it is very evident that that is her life until he goes up into the attic to change a light bulb, and then a different husband comes back down. Her whole surroundings now change to be pictures with this new guy. And this continues to happen. She's like shopping for a new husband. But this book plays with the idea that once you have so many options, you're never going to be happy with what you actually have. Like, you're always going to wish that you got something else or you made a different decision. And I am obsessed with that idea. I love that concept, and reading about it in a book, 10 out of 10. Now, I'm recommending both of these books to you because I feel like the magic system in both of them, I think, like I already said, doesn't entirely like make sense. It's something that you just have to accept. You can't like look or think too hard into it because no, it's not something that happens in real life. It's not something that makes entire sense, but the storytelling and the actual like trajectory of the plot, I feel like are similar enough, again, to make this recommendation. I just loved this book. This next one, I feel like is a really strong recommendation as well, okay? If you have read The One by John Mars, I think that you would love The Measure by Nikki Erlich. The One by John Mars is surrounding the idea that there's a genetic test that you can take to determine who your perfect match is. The results obviously have no regard for whether your perfect match is already married, on the other side of the world, anything like that. And so this test will break up marriages, causes unrest, and we're following so many different point of views in this book, just like we do in The Measure, but one of the point of views is a serial killer. This is a thriller. I didn't say that. The One is a thriller. You could probably tell by the cover. One of the point of views is a serial killer, makes for a very interesting read. Chapters are very, very short. Audiobook is really great because every point of view has a different narrator. I'm comparing these two books because this is like a worldwide phenomenon that goes on with this genetic test, right? Now, in The Measure, everyone in the world wakes up one day to a box in their front door, and inside has a string. The string depicts how long your life is going to be. Some people don't open it, some people do open it, and if they're a couple, sometimes one of the person's string is very short and the other person's is very long. And so that will tell them basically that one of them is going to die very early on in their relationship. And will that change how they live their lives? So on and so forth. So we're following, I think, like 5 point of views in The Measure, but it is surrounding this like worldwide panic of that situation. These are different genres. The Measure is more like sci-fi contemporary fiction, and The One is like a thriller. But I think that the idea and vibe is very, very similar. The Measure, I will tell you, I absolutely sobbed at it. It is a very emotional book by the end of it. The one isn't very an emotional book mostly, but again, if you liked one and you want to try a different genre, like take this recommendation. If you like one, try the other sort of thing because the vibes are there. This last group, I, full disclosure, have not read one of the books, but it was sent to me from the author himself, and it sounds like it would be a great recommendation for this pairing, okay? So I can't say that it 100% is a great book, but it sounds great. You know what I'm saying? If you have read The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez, and if you haven't, you should, because it is one of the most unique books that I've ever read. This one is surrounding our two main characters who are warriors who are shepherding an ancient god across a broken land to end a tyrannical reign of a royal family. I can't even like explain this book adequately because it is told in so many different ways. Like the formatting of the book is really interesting. We have multiple point of views that are seamlessly interchanged while you're reading it. This is one that I would recommend like actually like sitting down to focus on, and also maybe having the audiobook, because the audiobook will sort of like audibly cue you to when things change via point of views. But very, very, very good. If you've read this or are interested in this book, you might want to pick up The West Passage by Jared Pekacek. Even just the title, The West Passage, made me think of The Spear Cuts Through Water, because as these two warriors are shepherding this ancient god, they're like having to go through different passages to reach their end destination. So again, maybe this is a loose recommendation, but actually it's not, because in this synopsis, it literally says, when the guardian of the West Passage died in her bed, the women of Grey Tower fed her to the crows and went back to their chores. No successor was named as guardian. No one took up the fallen blade. The West Passage went unguarded. Now, snow blankets gray in the height of summer. Gray is a place, by the way. The G is capitalized. So snow was covering the place of gray, foretelling the coming of the beast. The two young mother of the gray house and the guardian's unnamed squire set out to save their people, okay? So our main characters are setting out to save their people. Their narrow shoulders bear a heavy burden. Before them lies the West Passage, home to horrors and delights that defy imagining. None can say if they'll reach their destinations, but one thing is for sure, the world is about to change. So in both of these stories, our main characters are set out in their land through the passages to basically save their entire kingdom and world. From reviews of this book, I've seen that it gets pretty weird, and this book is also pretty weird, so that just furthered my comfort in this recommendation. Plus, this is a brand new book that just came out, I think last month or the month before, so why not also promote new releases, right? And Travis Baldree blurbed it on the front, by the way, A Dangerous Book of Secrets. Suni Dean blurbed it on the back. Jenn Lyons blurbed it on the back. Wow, that's exciting. Like, there's a lot of good praise for this book. So if you like one, try the other, read them both. Great idea. I hope you found at least one new book to try. I tried to bring in some really classic old ones mixed with some newer ones, books that I'm excited about and have loved in the past. So I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know down below which recommendation you liked or whichever book you're going to try. That would be really exciting for me to see. And also come back and let me know if you took one of these recommendations and you loved it. But if you don't know what else to say, then leave me the key emoji down below in the comments. And while you're down there, please do subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support. And of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye!